This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
These are the faces of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill as they file claims with BP here in Escambia County and elsewhere along the Gulf Coast. They include fishermen, charter boat owners, shrimpers, crabbers, owners of rental property, workers who have lost income, businesses that have seen their cash registers slow down. Altogether, more than 2,000 claims filed with BP so far in Florida, and of course it's still early in the process. Good evening, I'm Lloyd Patterson. Welcome to CTC, Connecting the Community. Tonight we are watching the leaking oil swirl around the Gulf of Mexico, like everyone else wondering when, where it might hit, if it does at all. Tonight we're keeping an eye on the financial impact as we also explore the environmental possible impacts of the oil. With us we have Dr. Richard Snyder. He heads the Center for Environmental Diagnostics and Bioremediation at UWF. His staff is among the university researchers from around Florida who are studying the spill and its potential impact. Keith Wilkins is Deputy Chief of Escambia County's Neighborhoods and Community Services Bureau. One of his programs is overseeing things like the Oriskany Reef and the many artificial reefs enjoyed by divers and fishermen. Buzz Ritchie is a former state legislator who is deeply involved in the civic health of Northwest Florida. And as head of Gulf Coast Community Bank, he's also worried about the economic health in light of the oil spill. And Christian Wagley has worked on environmental issues in Florida and the Southeast for some 15 years. He founded Sustainable Town Concepts to help design environmentally friendly homes and workplaces. And I would say it's fair to say that he's the only one with a bicycle parked in the lot in front of the station too. So hats off to you, Christian. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming tonight. We are here 30 days after the Deepwater Horizon incident. And of course, we want to mention, we acknowledge the deaths of the men on that, but we're still talking about the oil. Are you surprised, Dr. Snyder, that the oil is still coming out?
Yeah, I think it's a surprise how long it's taken and that there weren't more or better plans in place for this kind of an event, because it's generally recognized that drilling in deeper water is riskier than shallower water. Still, people have to understand this is a mile down in the water, and this is not a trivial operation by any means. Just to be down there, everything's done robotically with ROVs, and incredibly technically challenging work to do. So, yeah, in a way, it's a bit surprising, but in another sense, it's a very difficult thing that they have before them.
Let me ask you, Buzz Ritchie, would you ever have thought 30 days ago that you'd still be seeing oil pouring out of the Gulf like that?
You know, Lloyd, as a layperson, I don't have the expertise as your other panelists do, but having been in the legislature and having been lobbied, if you will, for years to support something like offshore drilling, which I always opposed, and always being reassured by those experts that this could never happen, this is very unsettling, and I'm probably as aggravated as anybody in the community can be, because I heard over and over and over again, this could never happen, this would never be an incident that we'd have to face. So yeah, it's very, very unnerving, very frustrating that we're going through this.
All right. Keith Wilkins, what about you?
No, I mean, it's the perfect storm of events, but frankly, when we saw what the problem was going to be initially, that I don't think we held much hope that it would be able to really be done quickly and expeditiously. As Dr. Snyder said, it's a very difficult, technically challenging project. I'm surprised that it hasn't happened before, that it took this long. You figure there's tens of thousands of drilling projects in the Gulf of Mexico, and I think part of that is a tribute to what a good job they have done, but it's also just a risk of the business that I'm surprised it hasn't happened before this.
They only have to be wrong once to have something like this facing them. Christian Wagley, you've been watching this. I know you're very involved in environmental issues around the area. What do you think about the oil? Are you surprised it's still going on?
Certainly I am, and I'm really disappointed that there weren't better safeguards in place. It's unfortunate that the agency, the Minerals Management Service that is supposed to regulate these offshore drilling operations, they've had the conflicting role of promoting offshore drilling and trying to regulate it at the same time, and it's really hard to do both effectively, and we've seen now that they didn't do a very good job of making sure that it was safe. And I think what I'm trying to do as somebody concerned about environmental issues and somebody that works with communities and with home builders and architects and people on building homes and communities, trying to look at the big picture and figure out how we can create a built environment that doesn't need so much energy in the first place, where we have to continue to go out and have that continued pressure for drilling in the Gulf.
If we would listen to guys like Christian Wagley, we wouldn't be needing the oil that we're getting out of the Gulf. Is that what you're...
Well, I mean, certainly there have been many voices more eloquent than mine for many decades talking about how the pattern of living we've created in this country for the last 60 years, where we've spread out all the uses, we've forced people to live apart from shops and restaurants and schools and all of their daily needs, which forces them to get into an automobile to do anything at all. And that's what drives the use of petroleum in this case in our country. And then also our homes and businesses not being nearly as energy efficient as they should be because of energy being relatively cheap in this country, and that continues to fuel that demand and continues to fuel the push to drill off our coast.
If you just joined us, I'm Lloyd Patterson here tonight with our panel. Once again, we're focused on what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico. The oil's still coming up. We don't know where it's all going to wind up. Last week we were more on the financial impact of what it might do to Florida. This week we're trying to skew it a little bit more toward the environmental impact. We do have questions that people have emailed in, and we have a great panel with us tonight, and I want to turn to Dr. Snyder, a microbiologist from UWF. The oil that's coming out is we're seeing, some of the oil we see seems to be kind of a light greenish sheen almost, and then some of it's a brownish thick stuff. What's going on with that oil?
Yeah, the fossil fuels run the gamut from coal, a solid, to tar pits, to methane, which is essentially a gas. And so the crude oil that we see is a mixture of very light materials and very heavy materials. The lighter materials are things like benzene and toluene, paint thinner materials, things we use in gasoline, things that evaporate readily. They turn into gases very quickly. And this well has what's called light sweet crude. That means it is a lighter material. It has a lot of these volatile materials in it, and sweet meaning it has low sulfur. So it is still a mixture. When it comes out, when you see the plumes, you see the videos of the plumes on the bottom, what's coming out is a liquid, and you see these white pulses of methane crystals. The methane forms in ice with the seawater at that depth. So not everything coming out of the pipe is all crude oil. A lot of it is methane. There's a tremendous amount of natural gas, methane in this well. When that material comes out of the pipe, it takes 3 hours for it to get from the bottom to the surface. When it gets to the surface, if dispersants aren't used, then the lighter material starts to evaporate, and it starts to mix with the seawater, and it will form, they call it a chocolate mousse. It has that consistency and that color, that brownish tan color to it, and will form patches and clumps that are floating on the water. Now, as the lighter material evaporates, and the bacteria will start eating that oil, but the bacteria also, like us, we like the lighter stuff. The bacteria like the lighter stuff too. Has more energy, more easily accessible energy. And so the bacteria will eat the lighter stuff. The lighter stuff's evaporating, and those clumps will get heavier and heavier and heavier with time, and they'll reach a point where they get heavier than the water, and they will sink to the bottom. And that's when we start getting tarball formation. These tarry patches that we see washing up on the beaches are the result of this, we call it a weathering process. Now, if they inject dispersants at the bottom or spray them on the surface, then it disperses the oil. It's not the same as, but equivalent to dish detergent in your sink, where you dissolve the grease and oil into the water. And so by spraying it in the bottom, they are actually dispersing the oil through the entire water column, a mile of water. And when they spray it on the surface, it tends to disrupt those clumps, but it isn't as effective at disrupting the large material. Mostly it's more effective with the lighter material. So you start to see in some of the videos these wispy sheens or spreads of the oil. The lighter stuff, the sheen is actually the lighter stuff spreading out, and then you'll see the clump stuff, that's the heavier stuff, and the dispersants don't work so well on that heavier stuff. but still you'll see it just these smears of oil on the surface, and that's the result of these dispersants.
Now the sheen, the lighter stuff that they use to make gasoline and paint thinner, all these products out of, this is the stuff that's likely to evaporate, and so we wouldn't likely see it before it would get to Pensacola because it's so light and it would evaporate? I
wish I could answer that question. This is one of the big unknowns with a spill, is that it is tremendously under the influence of wind. This time of year, our prevailing winds are from the east, southeast winds, easterlies. If you're a Pompano fisherman, you know that messes you up some days. And we've been very lucky because it's been pushed to the northwest by those southeast winds. It's not unusual, though, for us to get 3 or 4 days, 5 days of a heavy southwest blow, and if we get one of those, we'll have sheen and we'll have oil right on top of us pretty quickly.
All right. One of the tools that a viewer wants to know about is related to the booms and how effective they are. With Keith Wilkins, with the time that you've had to prepare now, do you have this, are you ready to sort of boom off everything in the area to protect? And how well do these booms work?
Well, there's an extensive boom network that's been deployed or staged for deployment depending on how busy the waterways are. And that's been done through the Area Contingency Plan by the Unified Command, which is BP and the Coast Guard and the state environmental agencies. And then at the local level, the counties have been standing up across the Gulf Coast to develop their own supplementary plans for issues that are areas they feel like have a local interest but maybe missed it at the federal level. So then we, as one of those counties, have deployed booms also to protect resources that we felt were vulnerable. And the booms, as far as their effectiveness goes, they're partially effective. They don't work well in currents. They won't work well in larger seas unless you have a sea boom, which are 40 inches high or higher. Most of the boom that's been deployed is a harbor boom, the lower 18-inch diameter or so.
Less effective.
Less effective, yes. And so it is expected that oil will get around those, and then you have skimmer boats or sorbent booms deployed in conjunction with those to try to skim the oil and maybe absorb the oil.
There must be, at this point, hundreds of ships out there. The Coast Guard's got ships. Every federal agency. The BP has hired every boat in Louisiana, I understand. Can they make a dent against that much oil?
I can't say. I'm sure they're making a dent through the various technologies that they've employed, but you know, there's still plenty of oil out there to clean up.
Now, with the booms, does the thick oil that Dr. Snyder was talking about, the brownish stuff that we're seeing washing up in the wetlands of Louisiana, is that it must have gotten by somebody's boom, or
probably. I doubt they had the entire coast of Louisiana boomed off. It's a lot of miles, but I know they were trying. But yeah, it'll get by the booms, and that's the worst area for it to get in this part of the United States is in the wetlands. It's harder to clean up there.
Okay, Okaloosa County, the people are reporting there that they have been smelling some of the burning, the burn off of the oil on the surface. Have you had any reports of that come to you?
We have, as recently as last night. We had calls about burning eyes, headaches, irritation, because of, mostly on Perdido Key, because of odor.
Buzz Ritchie, have you had anybody tell you that they
did? Oh, absolutely. Yes, I have. I haven't experienced it myself, but I have had people tell me, even in town, even in the downtown area, in the Gulf Breeze area, they've represented that they've felt the effects or smelled the effects of the petroleum.
Christian, you work in the downtown area. Have you sensed it?
I have not personally. I have friends and coworkers who have, yes.
Okay, should that be a health concern to us? Is that likely to lead to any problems, Keith? Do you think that?
Well,
I know it's monitored.
It is being monitored, and the question arose today about what are the triggers to issue a warning in the health department, and I know Dr. Snyder's worked with them on it, and we were today also, on what are those triggers, what do we need to look at in order for the health department to make a call.
All right. I have some other questions here from viewers. Someone asked, everyone seems to concentrate on the surface oil. What about the oil that has been dispersed by chemicals, will these enter the bays and marshes by simply going under the booms? And what is the nature of the chemically dispersed oil and the concentrations? Will they cause negative impact on critical species? Dr. Snyder?
Yeah, use of dispersants is a double-edged sword. It will dissolve the oil in the water, and that increases what we call the bioavailability of it. That just means that it's more likely to contact with biota. The contact with biota happens two ways. It'll have a more acute toxic effect, and so anything in the plankton where these dispersants and the dispersed oil is likely to be killed. That includes eggs and larvae of a lot of our marine species. The other side of this, the other edge of the blade, is that the bioavailability of that oil makes it more available to the bacteria that will eat the stuff, and ultimately it's the bacteria that are going to clean up this mess for us.
So it's not all good.
No, it's not, and
it's not something you'd want to just go out there and spread around in the water, just to help feed the ocean.
There's an unprecedented amount of dispersants being used on this spill. The last estimate I saw was 500,000 gallons have been sprayed and injected at the bottom. These have toxicity themselves. It has never been used on this scale before, and almost all the tracking of the spill is being done visually. All the analysis you see on the web, the maps that are generated, it's all visual, satellite, airplane, and boat reports of oil. We don't know where the dispersed oil is going. EPA's mandate to BP in using the dispersants was that they be able to track it, and we are not seeing any of that data.
You know, it seems like I don't know, and I'm not blaming you for this, but it seems like I don't know is going to be the slogan that this whole oil mess is remembered by. BP, I don't know. EPA, I don't know. Nobody seems to know anything.
This whole disaster is unprecedented, and there are a lot of things that are unknown, so many things that are, it could go one way or the other. It depends mostly on the winds at this point, and the complex circulation pattern of the Gulf, the eddies coming off of the loop current, the currents on the continental shelf. Anybody who's a diver or a fisherman knows that you can have bottom currents going one way and surface currents going the other. It's an incredibly complex system out there, and it is a big ocean.
Buzz Ritchie, do you think the community's getting the information it needs about does somebody know something they're not telling us, do you think?
I do think it's just a phenomenon. Who knows? It's uncharted territory, and there's a lot of frustration. I hear that a lot from principally business people and bank customers, that if they just knew what they're up against, and people make that analogy to a hurricane. You know where the hurricane is, you kind of know if it's coming in or not coming in, you have a pretty good sense of how big it is, and you can take some action steps. I think that's the most frustrating thing for the average citizen, because they're all sitting back listening to experts and they don't know what to do, and they feel helpless, and there's a lot of despair there, I think.
Keith Wilkins, are you feeling any of that despair yourself as you try to get information? You're a guy who's got to make some decisions, and you've got to base it on good information.
Certainly. I think data management has been one of the greatest challenges of this crisis. Getting information flowing from top to bottom and back again to make those decisions has been very difficult, and we've worked through a lot of those issues. But yeah, there's still a lot of missing information, particularly with forecasts and with the ocean currents. And again, like Dr. Snyder was saying, the complexities of the Gulf Loop current and what does that mean for our beaches. In Alaska, Cordova was 40 miles or something from the Valdez, and they never got a drop of oil on their coastline, but it smeared 1,500 miles the other direction. So everybody hopes for that type of phenomenon.
Christian, what about you? Do you feel like there's some information that is lacking and somebody's withholding it, or they just don't know it?
I'm not sure that there's a grand conspiracy there. I mean, I just think it's unfortunate that a lot of the research wasn't funded, and we didn't make BP do some of the safety precautions and things ahead of time that would have prevented these things, and we would have, I think, better information if we had planned better for this sort of thing. But I think it points out again that dual role that the government had in trying to regulate and promote drilling at the same time, and you can't do that properly. And so I think that the things weren't done that should have been done that could have prevented it, and that's the unfortunate part.
Another viewer writes that Pensacola is always home, and is concerned about the severity of the oil spill. Is there a chance of the beach being off limits for the summer? At this point, does anybody think that?
I think that's probably very, very unlikely. We won't see beach evacuations. I don't think the beach will be off limits. Again, we can get a very strong southwest wind for several days and all that could change. But right now, it looks like what we may see as much as anything is tarry material that will be washing up on the beach, scattered patches of oil that might show up. But I don't expect that we'll see the black tide as everybody fears. It's not going to come ashore as a wave of oil. We're not going to get inundated with oil. I think what we're going to see is just little scattered bits here and there, and it's just going to be a long-term cleanup problem to deal with that.
Okay, another viewer wants to know, do you think the oil will possibly be absorbed into the ocean floors again? The oil that settles back down to the...
Probably unlikely.
Unlikely.
Yes. It's a long way to get back down to 13,000 feet where it came from.
Yeah, it's not just going to sift down,
no, it will not.
Down in there. There was as I pointed out earlier in the program, we're trying to watch this both as a environmental disaster in the making, but also the profound financial consequences for Northwest Florida. And Buzz Ritchie, I'll ask you about this. Moody's, which is a major ratings service, it says whether a business or a government's bonds are really good risk or bad risk, and they're putting out a warning that Florida, the state of Florida, could be in big financial trouble because the cities and towns and school districts will likely experience a decline in property tax values, which will necessitate a reduction in services or an increase in other revenue. It goes on. Buzz Ritchie, is that plausible?
Well, yeah, and obviously you get the sense there, Lloyd, that somebody at Moody's woke up one day and said, uh-oh, there's something out there called the Gulf Loop. This isn't just about 3 or 4 counties or 5 counties in Northwest Florida, which from a Moody's and a state bonding perspective would be manageable. Probably that kind of article had more impact on city and county governments. But when you start talking about the Gulf Loop, and you talk about going down the southwest Florida coast through the Keys and back up the southeast coast, now all of a sudden you got the state surrounded. And that's got to cause some real anxiety. Maybe too early to start getting overly concerned about that, but that's Moody's job, to point these kind of things out and alert the investor world that these bonds could in fact be in some real jeopardy down the road.
Yeah, I'll leave entirely aside the point of where were these guys a couple of years ago when we could have used some better information, but that's on another topic.
They're not perfect either.
Okay, well, I guess not. Another question from a viewer that we want to get to. You've had some extra time now to prepare for the oil's arrival. How are the leaders using that time to make preparations?
We've been very fortunate that we've had more time. It gave us an opportunity to sit back and evaluate what we had done so far, what we had planned and accomplished, and then start tweaking that. And it really gave us more of an opportunity to conduct more detailed pre-assessments to document the existing conditions of the shorelines, the sediment, the benthic fauna. We also revised our booming plans, and it's given us opportunity to look at places that maybe we don't control, like Perdido Pass, that's actually in Alabama, but Innerarity Island is closer to Perdido Pass and Gulf Breeze is to Pensacola Pass. So Florida's very much vested in how that pass is protected. So it's allowed us to kind of look beyond our own area, immediate area, and make sure that we're being protected as best as we can.
We know from our past experience with hurricanes around here that each county, probably every city, and the states certainly have elaborate planning for hurricanes. Is any of that any help as we get ready for this? You think that was there a plan hidden away in somebody's drawer someplace for this kind of thing?
No, there wasn't. Not in Florida. There wasn't. Perhaps in Texas, Louisiana. We didn't have this in our contingency plan. We will next time, if there is a next time, we will in a month when we don't need the contingency plan because we're in the throes of actually doing it. But it took us all by surprise, I think.
Okay. Buzz Ritchie?
Well, I do think to some extent, not that anybody foresaw this type of oil spill disaster, but BRACE, Be Ready Alliance Coordinating Emergencies, I think has a multidisciplinary coordination that's been ongoing more for the thought that another hurricane could come. And if you saw some of the initial volunteer initiatives, you saw that we had ability to marshal some people, but certainly all the agencies are going to be called upon to respond. I think there's better coordination now than there was in the past. And once a plan of action is in place, you have everybody at the table automatically. And that we needed that in Ivan. We didn't have it, and that was a lesson learned that's probably going to pay some dividends now. And
you were one of the guys that really stepped forward after Ivan and helped get the community
well,
back.
we worked with some issues, and I've stayed in touch with it. I'm on the BRACE board, and so there are some advantages I think we may have.
Okay, we're down to our last few minutes here. As you look ahead, what should we be watching, Dr. Snyder, in the Gulf? What news are you looking for? What can we take away and learn from this?
I think the best thing that could happen is they get this thing capped quickly. They've got to shut off the flow of oil. As long as oil is getting to the surface, we don't know where it's all going. We can't account for it all. We know some of it's dispersing in the water. We don't know where those plumes are going. We're trying to catch up to that to try to track those plumes. The surface slick, everybody can see that, and the best thing people can do is keep track of their weather stations and their weather buoys out there that'll let you see what the winds are doing right there at the spill site. It can be very different up here than what's happening out there. There are several good sites that look at Gulf currents. So there are ways to keep track of this on a daily basis if people are really interested.
Okay, Christian Potter, the quarterback for Florida State.
I know who that is.
Okay, I'm sorry, Christian Wagley. What are you going to be looking at here?
Well, obviously, like as Dr. Snyder said, I mean, I hope that this can get capped as quickly as possible. It's unfortunate there's going to be a certain amount of impacts just from what's already out there. But I think I always would encourage people to look at the big picture again. It's one thing to control environmental issues. It's much better to prevent them from happening in the first place. And that's why when we redesign our communities so that we don't have to drive as much, we can be more compact development, more mixed use, more walkable shops and restaurants within our neighborhood. This is going on all around the nation in hundreds of different communities, and that's the future, a future where we can wean ourselves off of oil and greatly reduce the need to continue to drill in the Gulf.
Keith Wilkins, what are you going to be looking at?
We'll be planning, hopefully we'll be planning along the lines of what Chris just talked about, that we do have more sustainable communities and sustainable development. That's where we need to be as a nation and as a state.
Okay, and Buzz Ritchie, you happen to be one of those concerned about it. Will the tourists come back?
Well, actually, I've got a good perspective, I think, from the financial aspect, and that's to keep in tune with what the Small Business Development Center brings to this community. It's an arm of the University of West Florida. It's on Chase and Palafox, 9th Avenue, excuse me, Chase and 9th Avenue. Small Business Development Center is the coordinating entity for small business administration assistance and grants. We know BP is supposed to pay for this, but we need some immediate short-term help. And the state has some programs they're also making available through the Small Business Development Center.
Thank you. WSRE.org for information on all of what we talked about tonight. Thank you for watching.